All right. Well, good evening. Super excited, Kelly. Tonight is our last night of the Are You Ready webinar series. And really, this is going to be a really important topic. This is going to be talking about how do we, as family, as student, really make the college decision and making sure it's informed, right? And we've talked a lot about the 6 keys of college fit. We've talked about financial aid and scholarships and everything else. The problem is how do we take in all that information? How do we, when we visit the colleges, we listen to the admissions, and how does that whole process now work? And when do you bring in like data and information and then your feelings, right? And sort of like, did I like the campus and was it pretty? And, do I feel like I'll belong here? And so that's what we're really going to talk about tonight. And then the last thing, and hopefully I get enough time to talk about it because you know me, I could talk forever, is really, it's so important that so many families don't develop a plan on how to be successful. So they're like, yeah, I'm going to college. And then like crickets, right? And then whether that's for the remaining senior year or also really thinking about how am I going to pay for everything? What's that discussion between you and me as a parent? And then also, what about socially? How am I going to engage in the college? How am I going to engage in my academics and sort of talking about that? So really important topic tonight. So super excited for you to be here. And Kelly, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm happy that we're finally to the end of our path and students can get some tips on how to make a better informed decision and then continue on with their plans so they're super successful.
Awesome. And I think that it's so true. We've talked about so much information and have some great guest speakers and stuff on. And really, all this information is just to help you make a better decision, right? And a more informed and more empowered decision. And hopefully this series, no matter if you're going to career and technical programs, if you're going to a 2-year, like an FSW, or if you're going off to UF or Harvard, the idea is really making the best option for you, your future success. And that's really what we want, because we know, Kelly, that a degree and a certificate, if you want to be successful in life, you really need some type of certificate or degree after post-secondary. Like there's really very little option there. So, and as always, thank you to everybody, Collaboratory, Sylvan, Fort Myers Tech, FGCU, FSW, Cape Coral Tech, the Foundation for Lee County, Sylvan, College MAs, for really just supporting us through all of this, Lee County School District and everybody else. So thank you as well. So let's get started. Are you ready to have a good night?
Yeah, let's dive in.
All right, let's go. So we're not going to get too high into this, but really thinking about the decision-making process. And so if you're a teacher, you're going to kind of see very similarities of kind of your hierarchy of needs, right? And sort of this Maslow of, how do I make a decision and how do I go through the process? And so at the beginning, what we want you to do is at the bottom, which is remember, is really thinking about all the information that you have learned throughout the entire college process, like application process, right? So looking at key information, looking at who was your college support network, thinking about the colleges and the physical features of it, and did you like the campus, their programs, all of that stuff is really important. And we're going to definitely come back to that and talk about that. We're also going to be talking about how to really understand some of the information that's going to be coming in after you apply, right? So that's going to be like your award letters, obviously your admissions, kind of re-looking at your college fit, bringing in feelings into the decision, because that's a really tough one. Like, when do you bring in decisions? We're going to apply that information to the fit and desirability ratings. We're also going to analyze all that information. We're going to talk to people, get feedback, evaluate what everybody else thinks, and really then create a plan to move forward so we're successful. So we're starting kind of going bottom, and then we're going to be working our way to the top to really making that decision. So the first thing I think is really important is sort of be talking about, and I'm seeing it on Facebook all over, and people are tagging me and everything else about, college admission decisions are coming in. And obviously they tag when things are good. They don't always tag when things aren't so good. And so there's going to be some different ways that, especially here in Florida, that they make the decision. So we remember last time we talked about applying, right? So we're at the point in the workbook where you've applied, you've sent in your application, and now you're just waiting. So what's going to come? Well, the first one is the admit, like, hey, you're admitted for fall, you're great, thank you so much. And that can either come through a letter, or that can come through like a portal that you have to create. And so that's an option. But when you look at, say, an FSU that are getting 56,000 applications and are only accepting 8,000, there's going to be alternatives or other things besides admit. There's more other options than the admit option for a lot of colleges. I mean, for Harvard, it's 92% are in other categories, right? So let's talk about those. So one of the things that Florida loves to do, especially UF, FSU, and some of the other ones, is they like to offer alternative admission. So what does that mean? That means they might offer you a summer term to come into the summer. They might ask you to come into the spring. It's like doing the UF PACE program, where maybe you do it online for the first year or two, or maybe, and UF again does this a lot, they say, hey, if you go to Santa Fe and do our engineering program at Santa Fe, then you can come into UF as a junior, senior, but you have to meet these prerequisites before you come in. And some NYU, I believe it is, no, Northeastern, they do one where they offer like a study abroad the first semester, and then you can come for the spring. So there's other alternative admissions they might give you. FIU does one where it's like a summer bridge program. So like if you haven't been super strong in maybe STEM, and that's the way you're going, and maybe you're a minority student, they give you an option to come on campus early, get some extra academic support, and then go into fall. So you really want to pay attention to, even though it says, hey, you're admitted, quote unquote, look and see if an alternative program was offered to you, because they only have so many fall admit seats. So they get a little creative with mixing and matching other programs. So you want to check that out and see if that's a good option. And I've had students give up. I don't want to be on the PACE online program for 2 years. I'd rather go to UCF and go somewhere else, or whatever that may be. And I've had kids say, no, I want to be a Gator, so I'm signing up for it, and that's the way I'm going to get there. The other kind of three that aren't so great, defer. We don't do a lot of defer here, but that's if you had applied early and then they're saying, you know what, we need to see more information. We need to see who else is applying, and we also need to see if maybe your grades or new test scores, but we're going to wait on making this decision, and we're going to move you to a different pool to be reviewed. So that's defer. Waitlisted, a lot of the Ivy Leagues and highly selective schools do this, and they basically say, hey, you're really great, and if we have a space available come open, we will put you on the wait list. It's interesting. I had shown you guys the common data set in a college. If you go down into the common data set, I think it's like in D or E, it'll tell you how many kids actually are put on the wait list and how many kids get off the wait list, meaning they actually got a seat. And there was one college, I don't remember which one I was looking at, I'll just make it up, say University of Chicago, and it was like 900 kids were offered wait list, and like one student got off the wait list. Like it's very rare. And so, but some it's more. So that is something that if you are waitlisted at a selective school and you're like, hey, what's my chances of maybe getting a seat? go to the common data set. Remember, just go to the college's website, type that in. And then the last one, the one we really don't want to see, is the deny. Maybe you had some things going on in your high school and your academic record, or you just weren't meeting those admission criteria that they had. Maybe there's more students applying than there has been before. You can appeal, if you got new scores or something else, and maybe you didn't have all the information. I had a student, this was a few years ago, and she really wanted to go to UNF. True story. She wanted to go to UNF, and they ended up denying her. Well, what had happened is she had a severe medical issue. She was having seizures like in 10th grade. So she had left school, come back to school, and she was kind of all up and down while they got her medicine and everything else. Well, we went back and she never mentioned why her grades were kind of like this. And so I said, is that where you want to go? And she's like, yeah, I really want to go to UNF. So I said, tell you what, let's write a letter of recommendation. Let's talk about that. And let's resubmit that, because I think that's going to give more context about what was going on. Sure enough, within a week, she got an admission letter, and she's been there. And I think she's already graduated by now and had a fantastic time. But that I have seen very rarely, but there are times, like if there were true pieces of information that were not stated in your application that you think might have been important, maybe you left off that you had a 504 and needed extended time testing, and that's why your scores are so low. Maybe there was this stuff that you missed. You could always reach out, but deny would be the last one. So when your application comes through, the first thing colleges do is they review it. And they also want to make an application decision at that time. So typically, kind of the admission rep, like when Kelly had talked to FGCU and UF and some of the FSU, and then usually the people that are assigned to our area are the ones that review our applications or your application. So when you're going to those college fairs and the people that are coming to that night, they're really important to get to know, because they know your school, they're getting to know you. And so if you're at Fort Myers High School, they know that there's an IB program, they know there's AP classes, they know that you could have done dual enrollment. And so when they look at your application, they're comparing you against other Fort Myers High School students. They're not comparing you against Moorhaven students. And we've talked about that before. So they make that decision. At decision time, then they decide what type of decision. Is it summer, fall, any special programs or anything like that? They communicate that with you. And also at that application is they do review you for scholarships. So like if your ACT, SAT scores are where they want to be, or maybe they're great and maybe you'd be great for the honors program or for merit scholarships or whatever, at that point, at application and right after admissions decision, as a yes, they review again for scholarship and program review. So it's important. I know you guys have already applied, but if you're watching this and you're juniors, that's why that resume and essay are so important, because you're both applying for applications, for applying and for scholarships. After they decide kind of what to give you, then they send out an award letter. Now, that process of application and you getting a decision, the scholarship and award letter could be months. You could get the yes decision in November and not get the award letter until February or March, because your FAFSA hasn't been completed. Maybe they're waiting on some additional information. Maybe you have to interview. Maybe you have to go on campus and do something or write an essay or whatever. So there is some time between there. Sometimes though, they know automatically you've earned a merit scholarship. And so maybe they'll say, hey, I know we're going to give you this $10,000 scholarship, but in your award letter, more information might come because now they have your FAFSA information and everything else. So again, it's very important to look at those two documents, both the admission letter and the award letter. Once you've decided and what you're doing, which is again what we're talking about tonight, then you go into housing and orientation. You put down your deposit, and then you follow their process of signing up for orientation. So so far you're really getting to the basics of, okay, what are the steps on their side and what's going on. Now, I've heard some schools, I had a student apply to FAU by November 1st. I mean, she had admission and scholarship letter literally within like 2 weeks. It was so quick, which is great for her because that was her number one school, and she felt done because she had gone through the process and felt really good about that college, and that's where she wanted to go. So let's go in and talk about, so again, that letter is going to come either through the mail or it's going to come through like a portal that you set up. So in the workbook, we do have an example of Emily, who's our case study about, and this is an actual award letter. Now, if you have several schools that are in front of you and you have their acceptances and award letters in front of you, you're going to notice that the award letters are all different. And it's really important to understand the information coming from those award letters. So I'm just going to kind of walk through this and then kind of show you a great comparison table that you can download for free. And I think it's just a great tool so you really understand what your costs are. So your first direct cost, so that is going to be tuition, required academic fees, and housing and meals. Now, you might not need housing and meals because let's say you're going to go to FGCU and commute from home. So they might put that on there, but know that that might not be a cost for you if you decide not to live on campus. And so, so some of these costs you might not have to accrue. So you're not really going to get out of tuition and you're really not going to get out of the fees. So you really need to make sure that that is like that. So you look at the total. Okay, so this student, their total with tuition and room and board is about $18,586. Then there's extra and what we call indirect costs, because these aren't like hard numbers. Like it could be your textbooks and supplies could be $500 or it could be $2,000. It depends if you're in computer engineering or if you're in an English major, right? So these are more of just like you to sort of gauge. And so they're giving you averages. So realize your personal expenses, if you're super bougie and eat out all the time, your personal expenses are going to be a lot more. If you're going to eat everything on campus and you're going to cook ramen and do it as cheaply as possible, and you could reduce these costs, but they put them on there so you have an understanding and you sort of budget in for that. And then they give you what we call scholarships and grants. So scholarships and grants are money you don't have to pay back. That's awesome. We talked about that last time, and the more scholarships and grants you have, the better for you. So this is your Pell Grant. The student was from Missouri, so Access Missouri Grant. Bright Futures might be on here. It might not be on here because it's hard for schools to say right now that you have guaranteed Bright Futures because your final grades haven't come out yet, or maybe your volunteer hours haven't come out, but the colleges have not yet connected to your high school at the award letter time to say your Bright Futures. They can maybe assume, so there might be scholarships, or if you're applying to the collaboratory and you might get a scholarship in May, that information is not going to be listed on this award letter. So again, you're bringing in outside information thinking, okay, am I going to live on campus? If I'm not, do I have Bright Futures? Do I have other scholarships coming in? And all that stuff needs to kind of go on here, but the college isn't going to know all of that at the award letter. And then they give you a total. One thing you want to be cautious of, some colleges group scholarships and grants and loans all together. And they're like, oh, look, you don't have to pay all this. But loans, remember, you have to pay back later. So we really like this one because this one was showing us that loans was separate. And again, you do not have to take out loans because your parents might look at this and say, you know what? Yes, do the work study because why not? You work, it's a nice job on campus. It's relatively easy. And you still get paid to do it, but money goes towards your college. But okay, if my loans are $5,500, maybe if I got a summer job and I can chip in, and maybe grandma can chip in 1,000, you don't have to take those loans. And if you do, look into them, know all of the requirements, the interest rates, everything, because this is the area down here that students and parents get really stuck on and make not very informed decisions, right? So the more you can pay off early, the better. So that's what they say self-help aid. What other self-help aid might be in there, such as if your parents had like a 529, like a college plan program where they've put money in and now they're paying out. So that would be sort of, again, they don't know all that information. So that's why award letters are only as good as the college knows about you, right? And so that's why it's so important that, again, you're bringing in that outside information and having that dialogue between parents and students and making sure that you understand the real costs of college. So you get your acceptance, and now you get the award letter comes next. So what we made, and if you go to College Unmazed, there we go, collegeunmazed.com/downloads, you can download this Excel sheet. And basically what it allows you to do is type in all the colleges that you've applied to and been admitted to, and break down each line: tuition and fees, room and board. So you can much easier see things and compare against, okay, look at, obviously Stevens College is 25,000. So that's a private school comparatively to here, Truman State's tuition's 9,000, right? But if you look here, total cost of attendance is 39,000. Yeah, I got $20,000 or $19,000 worth of scholarships. However, and Truman, you only got 10, but still Truman is $9,000 or $8,000 cheaper, right? So these are the conversations that you have to have. Is, say, Stevens College worth that much to you, and why? And that's what we're going to talk about, right? And why to pay that difference. And if you're like, oh, I can't pay 13 or 14,000. Okay, well, can we take out room and board? And if we did, what would that look like? How can we minimize some of these expenses and so forth? And can you pick up a job or whatever? So again, conversations you guys need to have. So great free little download. Go ahead and do that at any point. So that'll be easy peasy for you guys. And then here on the second half, of the comparison table is the loans, right? And this is, we put it in red because we want you to really pay attention that this is stuff that you have to do something. You have to either pay it back or you have to physically work at the college. And this is stuff, again, that you can deny if you need to, because again, if you're able to cover as much as you can, the better. So that's why this number, this green, is more realistic, this net cost. Remember, we talked about that early on. Comparatively to, they're like, oh, look, you only have to pay, Steven says, oh, you only have to pay $13,000. Yeah, but you're also taking out almost $8,500 of loan and work study. That's a lot. So that's, and over 4 years, 9,000 times 4, I mean, you're talking $36,000. And then that can compound, as well. So things just to think about. But Stevens might be your dream school, but that's a consideration to have, right? So what we do is, once the admission comes back, you get your award letters. What you need to do, and again, this was just a case study that we're showing you. It's in the book, and then we have you do it by yourself. But what we do here is we have you go back through the 6 keys of College Fit. If you remember that, we talked about student outcomes like graduation, retention. If it's an academic match, like, are you meeting their sort of criteria? Is it a personal match? Like, that's diversity, campus culture, career match, like career services, internships, financial match, like, do they give you lots of money and scholarships and so forth? And student support services like mental health. I took my daughter up to Florida Southern. They had a great day, and it was just fun. Her and her friend, we went up there and stayed the night, and then went to, and I know the admissions really well, so I'm like, oh, let's just go. And it was fun. They're sophomores, right? And I ended up, there was like a little, all the clubs and activities and services were all in this kind of area, and we could go talk to them. And I went up to they had like a therapy dog. And so I started talking to the mental health guy who runs the director of mental health there. And I said, and I explained who I was, Amanda Sturck with College MAs, and this is what I do. And I talk to families and people all the time. And I said, I'm so mad that people, they don't talk about student support services. They don't talk about ABA services and adaptive services, and they don't talk about mental health services with their kids. And then it's too late. And he goes, yeah, he's like, we have this amazing office. And I said, well, how long does it take to get in to see somebody, he's like, we try to get every person in within a day or two and at least do a consult. And then we usually do like a week out. And he's like, yeah, a lot of colleges are 2, 3, 4 weeks out. And if you're in a mental health crisis, it's really hard to get help. And I said, why don't we talk more about mental health and accessing those services? So again, that's my soapbox. But we need to have that conversation. And these are the conversations. Do you have tutoring services? If you're in Calc 1 engineering and math isn't your super strong suit, and you need to get through this to be your your bio major, what are your services to make sure that you pass Calc? Because you have to pass Calc, and that's the time that you have to go back through and really strip away this, oh, I just love UF. It's all the bricks and everything else. And they have 8 Starbucks on campus or what. I'm being superficial, but just giving you an idea here. UF is great and all of them are great. But don't bring in the emotion right now. What you're doing right now is you're re-looking at all the data, the information, and you're talking about each college that you got accepted. Because remember, you applied where you said, I could see myself here, right? And so now that we know that we're admitted, we have to go through and carefully analyze and actually rate. So this rating is really important to talk about each of the 6 keys of college fit. And now re-looking at the colleges, now knowing that, yes, you are admitted and you could, and do you potentially see yourself going there? So super important. So we'll bring in the emotional here in a little bit, but that's what you need to do first and have that conversation with your student and parent. That needs to be a good conversation. If they don't know these, go back and explore again, go back and visit the college again. So if you're like, I don't remember, then you need to go back and really do that. So after you have that information, that kind of analytical data information, this is when you start looking at, and the question is, how would you define desirability? Like, how do I feel about really going there? So to include the desirability perspective, what you're looking at, is it low, moderate, high? So is it not really desirable for me to attend like the Stevens College? It's actually an all women's college. And, maybe once she got through the college, she really felt like, what, I really like that mission. I really liked what it stood for and what opportunities are available. And so that means it's very desirable for me to attend, because that's sort of like emotionally, it kind of speaks to me. And I like the campus. I like how far it is from home. I really think that would be a good fit. And then we have moderate, like, it's good. I could do that. That's no problem. And then low is like, you know what? I really don't see myself there. Like, I don't have that sort of personal connection. So you could easily have a college that has a high fit, but your desirability is low. And if that's not matching up, you might want to ask yourself why, right? If they have everything that it has, what does it not have? Or reverse. There's a lot of times that we get emotionally attached to a college, but it really doesn't have any of the 6 keys. Like, it might not have your major, it might not have the internships that you're looking for, maybe the type of dorms that you're looking for. And so, like, merging those 2 ideas together really need to be congruent if you're going to be successful at that college. And that's why I think a lot of students are not successful. Over half of the students that start college don't finish college within 4 years. Like, that is just the truth. That is data, right? And so if we don't have this conversation, I feel like that's the half that sort of goes and realizes that they've not made a good decision, right? And usually it's too late. They've tanked their grades and they don't feel comfortable, and now they're kind of in limbo what to do next. So what we have you do in the book is we have you bring those 2 things together. So we have your overall fit is on the left-hand side and desirability. So for example, let's go with fit. So we had marked in the first here, what was it, Missouri, St. Louis. Okay, so St. Louis, we added them all up and they were low fit for us because we put them lower numbers. And when we kind of talked about it and where it's located and stuff to us, we also said, it's not super desirable. So we put low, which would be in this first box. And we did all of that. We merged them together. And we really found kind of two schools based on overall fit being high and our desirability being high, that those two schools are probably our best option. They're meeting my fit, my needs, and also personally, it would fit who I am. And so what I would do as a parent is kind of focus on, here's four, there's several that were high desirability and moderate fit or high fit or desirability, but maybe hone in on the four, have a discussion about them, maybe remove St. Louis off of here and kind of get that off, and maybe these two start coming off, but that's a conversation. Let's talk about it. Why is this not really meeting here? So that's what our case study, and again, we walk you through it, we talk about it, and then we have you do that. So what you do is, let's say you have these four colleges left, and we know that they're all good options. Like they're all kind of meeting my fit. They're all kind of meeting my desirability. So really now is the time that we have our case study, and you in the book is to really articulate and communicate, what does it have that I really like, and really kind of define it, kind of like a pros and cons list, right? I really like this, don't really like this, and really kind of write it out so you can communicate it as a person, right? And articulate that information instead of just always keeping it as, I think a lot of times we keep it as like a gut feeling, like, I don't know, it's just how I feel. But when you can actually say, Mom and Dad, this is how I feel, then it becomes a real conversation and something we can do with it, becomes more tangible, right? And so Emily, based on her information, she's kind of our case study here kind of goes through the information. And what she does is she basically decides to remove 4 and gets down to 2. And then she needs to make her decision. Now, sometimes they're pretty comparable, and what is sort of what pushes me over this edge versus this edge. And so what's really important, and you can do this at any time throughout the process, is use the college support network that's around you, especially as a student. That's your parents, that's your school counselor, that could be maybe a coach. It could be a lot of different things. Maybe it's a mentor or somebody you volunteer with. Maybe it's an alumni. Maybe it's going back to the campus and visiting again. Whatever it may be, use the people around you to talk through that idea and say, this is what I'm thinking, and this is why I feel this way and this way. And I was talking to one of my students the other day, and he talked to an alumni he was interested in Mississippi, Ole Miss, and he was like, oh, it's at the bottom of my list. And then I talked to somebody and they told me about all these opportunities and everything. He's like, I didn't know it had all this. And now he's much more excited about Ole Miss than it was on his list, but now it kind of moved up in his list, right? So talk to other people about their experience. What do they know? Do they know people that have finished the program, and did they like it? Were they successful? So it's really important to include the people that you trust, the adults in the room, friends a little bit, right? I mean, part of your support network could be your bestie and so forth, but really it needs to be people that maybe have a more external view and can kind of look at a lot of different perspectives versus like, oh my gosh, I just want to go be a knight. That's all I want. That's kind of hard, especially if they haven't gone through this process and you have. They might not be as articulate as you possibly could. So basically, you're kind of, again, you're going through this whole process. You're remembering, you're thinking about everything you've learned, your 6 keys, the leads process, and that's what we're on D, decide, right? List, explore, apply, decide, and then we'll talk about succeed here in a second. And so then you're going to take all that information once you've been admitted, your financial aid award letters, you do your 6 keys of college fit, and then you bring in that desirability. You apply that information, you analyze it, you evaluate, talk to people, and then you can really make a solid decision. Sometimes it's still a little gray, like which one? And at some point you're going to have to make that decision, but no, even if it's a little gray, that you have gone through this whole process, and it could be very possible that 2 options are really great for you, and that's okay. And so just know that any of them are going to probably be a great school, because you've already gone through the process, you've thought about it, and it will make yourself a lot easier. Okay. So award letter, sorry, this was a different PowerPoint. So we've already talked over this. So once you've made that decision, there still needs to be 3 conversations. And these are the conversations when I talk to counselors all over the country, when I go present and at conferences and so forth, and even the decide in leads, list, explore, apply, decide, succeed. The D, all that information I just went through, I don't think, and Kelly, you can probably agree with me on this one, we don't talk enough about that as a school, right? And that's hard, because how you actually make a decision is really hard to explain. And we base it a lot on like feeling. Well, what do you think? What do you feel? Kelly, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Totally agree.
Yeah. And so, everyone's building lists and you're applying and so forth. But what we're not teaching kids is how to make a decision and really think through the kind of statistical data and then also that sort of personal feeling. And then what we don't do is we don't sit down with our student and say, okay, you've made a huge decision. We've gone months, a year. I mean, I have parents already contacting me and it's December for next year about college admissions. People are already panicking, right? And so we do all this work, but then we don't talk about how do you actually make a plan to be successful? Again, are you going to be the 50% that are successful or the 50% that fail out or don't complete on time and just keep going and going, accruing credits, right? So the succeed section is super important, and it really should, I think succeed could be a whole book on itself, honestly. So you definitely don't want to just stop at apply. So many people just stop, okay, I've applied, I'm done. No, because there's still the hard work of actually going through this. So what we have you do in succeed, in the S in leads, is we have you I can't speak, you create 3 college success plans in 3 different areas. And there's 3 things that we think are really important for families to talk about. One, finances, right? So you have the award letters. Now we need to talk details. We need to talk who's paying for what. And I'll give you some questions here in just a minute. Who's paying for what work study, how do I keep my scholarships, like what, and Bright Futures. You can lose Bright Futures, people. So if you choose wrong on a college because it's not a good fit for you, you don't get Bright Futures back. It's gone. And so what do I need to do? Some have volunteer hours that go with it, right? Sometimes you have to reapply for scholarships. So there's a lot of things that we don't sit down and say, okay, what are my financial obligations as a student, as a parent? And, what are those things? What does that look like? So we'll talk about that. Academic integration. So what are we really going to do to make sure we're on track to graduate and graduate on time and without debt, our majors and options and things like that. So again, we'll talk about that. And then what's the follow through? And then the last one is social, right? So much of college is that social environment, the clubs, the activities, extracurriculars, the things like that. And then really developing a concrete plan on what does that look like. So we either don't burn out, because what you do in high school is not what you can do in college. And then on the reverse, making sure that you get engaged early and those experiences are meaningful, right? So let's kind of talk about it here. So let's talk about some financial integration. Again, these are all in the book, so I'm not going to spend a long time, but these are just some really good questions to ask. If I don't like my financial aid award letter, which does happen, like for example, let's say you as a parent, you get hurt. I had a parent a few years ago that she hurt her back. And because she hurt her back, she was the physical therapist, she could not do her job. So for like 6-7 months, she was healing and couldn't work. Well, her financial status, in 2021 would look a lot different than maybe what it is in 2022. But let's say they were using the 2021 information you can say, or with the hurricane, a lot of you have lost a lot of stuff, and maybe your business has shut down. And I mean, if you have a business on Sanibel, maybe it's shut down and you haven't worked in 2-3 months. You can appeal a financial aid award letter. You need your information, but you definitely can do that. What will be my total loan debt? What would be my monthly payments? You can actually figure that out. For private loans, maybe do I go to a bank? Do I want to do like a federal loan? So you really want to ask those questions. How do I maintain eligibility for all grants and scholarships? How do I use my work study money? Does that go back to tuition? Do I get that in my pocket? What does that look like? What financial aid forms need to be completed every year? Are there additional funding opportunities at the college? So once you get there, like if you join the honors programs, a lot of times you get an extra $1,500 or so. Maybe there's paid internships. Maybe there's being a research assistant. There's all those different types of things. Who should I connect with at the financial aid office? They're your friends, right? They are good people. They want to help. So definitely get to know them. And does the state I have maybe have a nonprofit higher education? We don't here in Florida. We used to, and they got rid of it a few years ago. But there are some high, nonprofit stuff that can actually help you with financial aid and so forth. So those are just some kind of basic questions. But beyond that, creating an actual budget, right? So what do I think my expenses are going to be? And again, who is in charge of what? And what does that process look like? I have a parent, they're actually out of Illinois, and they were telling me they don't want to tell their son, but they're basically going to pay for college, and he's going to go out of state to Colorado, which if you know anything about Colorado, out of state, you're paying a lot. But he wants them to kind of take a loan out. So he sort of tries to pay it back and do some stuff. And then at the end, just sort of forgive the loan. So he was talking with me through that, like how should I create that conversation? Like, what do you have to pay? What are we paying? And here he had gone through the entire application process and they hadn't even talked about who's paying for what, so really important information. Because I think the kids should know, like, hey, we're going to do that or we're not going to do that, or vice versa. Academic integration. So again, this is really about maintaining your academic standing. How do I do that? My daughter, for example, is taking a dual enrollment college class, and she has a discrepancy with grades. And so I'm like, you have to go in and talk to the professor. You have to schedule during their office hours. You have to go in, you have to do this, you need to talk to them. And so that's really important to making sure that they know how to self-advocate. And if they're not doing well, what is that predictor? Or like, what's that kind of metric system look like? So when they actually get to a point where they're not feeling great, that they're being more proactive than reactive, right? And so maybe just scheduling, if a class is going to be difficult, don't put hard classes around it, right? Put maybe a little easier classes if you know you need to spend a lot of time in math or science, especially in some of those prerequisite courses that you have to have for your major and you have to have a certain grade. If those are going to be hard for you, really, focus in on them and do the best you can. How are you connecting with faculty and staff? I always, again, in my dual enrollment world, kids, especially that do like the full-time dual enrollment, and I'll say, hey, who's going to write your letter of recommendation? They're like, oh, I don't know. And I said, which faculty do you really connect with? They're like, oh, I don't really know. I don't really talk to anybody. And I'm like, that's sad. If you're not going through college, if you're going through college and you really aren't talking to your professors and you're just being a passive learner, that's really sad to me, because the professors have so much information to give, and so do the staff. Oops, sorry, wrong way. The staff, academic, like advising, tutors, student services of all kinds, super important. Do you find your studies engaging? Are they relevant? Do you have a lot of value? Do you see your classes and future career possibilities? How's your major working out? So these are things that really every semester you need to sort of go back through, review, talk about, ask about, and really make sure you're on track. You have to be the owner of your own academic plan. Really important. So social integration, some of the kind of key things to think about is, feeling a sense of comfort. Do you like the culture, the climate? Have you built really good relationships? Have you kind of created a common cause with other students? What have you gotten involved with? How are you going to create meaningful friendships and relationships? Maybe those are maybe through like, maybe you're going to join a sorority or a fraternity, or that's really important. Or maybe you're really big into Key Club now, and maybe you want to go into Kiwanis there. Or maybe they have an option for that. So, and one that I think, again, we need to talk about security, safety. So when I was at Florida Southern, I'm visiting, and I know a lot of the answers already because I've been doing this for a long time. And so just the whole group was there, and I said, I have a question. And oh yeah, and I said, what did you guys do during the hurricane? So we had Hurricane Ian come through, and I know, what FGCU did, what FSW did. I said, as students, how did you feel when Hurricane Ian came through? What was the communication? Where did you go? What did that look like? Because that would be really scary. If my son or daughter was hours away or in a different state, and there's a natural disaster, or heaven forbid, there's a gun on campus, or whatever might be happening, or shooting, or whatever. I mean, I think, well, where is it? In Idaho just recently, they had like 4 kids just got killed. Like, what was that communication? What happened? And it was really good hearing that from the students, because they both were RAs, and they kind of said, what communication looked like. And as a parent, I just thought that was a really good question. And everyone's like, oh, like they hadn't even thought about that. And all their questions like, oh, what do you guys eat? And I'm like, who cares what you eat? You're going to eat sandwiches and, like, and to some kids that might be really important. But to me, what does safety look like? I don't know. So that another soapbox of mine, sorry. And do you feel accepted into the groups? Do you feel like this is a place that you belong? And if not, how do you definitely get to be? And so what we have for Emily is we really talk about, okay, and we actually develop action plans. So writing out the plan is, what am I going to do for the summer? What do I need to build up? Do I need to get a part-time job? Do I need to increase some hours to, pay for that little extra money that we have to spend? Determine what amount we want to accept for loans. Am I going to do work study? I'm going to check all my scholarship stuff. I'm going to make sure FAFSA is all completed, and I've told FAFSA where I'm going to go. I'm going to create a budget, and I'm going to do that all before I even get to campus. But then throughout the school year, we need to make sure that we are following up and doing everything. I put all of them here. Summer for academic, we talk about meeting with her advisor. We help with enrollment, make sure she's enrolled. We make sure her high school transcript and dual enrollment transcript and ACE and IB, all that stuff gets sent and gets accurately matriculated to the college. I have heard, I won't say which college, it might be up north somewhere. Unless you send your transcript and unless you go in and make an appointment, they don't just automatically put those credits on a transcript. Like, you actually have to go in and do stuff. And if you don't do it within like the first 6 months, they say that you don't get your credits. So you definitely need to make sure that all those little things are sort of, finished and created and done. We had Emily here, for example, she really wanted to be part of the psychology club. So she contacted somebody, she met with them. And she also walked the campus and found out where all the learning resources, and then she used all those resources over the summer. And then lastly, for social, she went to, like, a lot of times colleges will have like, hey, you've been admitted, come to our campus and check things out. Just going back to Florida Southern, they have it for all admitted kids. You can come actually stay on campus for a night and then go out and actually live like a college student, which is super cool. And so if you're sort of deciding, or even have decided, that's a great way just to kind of get to know somebody. And if your roommate comes, they actually try to partner you up, which is really cool. Our student here was, she decided to go do soccer. So she really was thinking about doing like a walk-on or being on the women's team, explored campus again for different residency halls, and then really talk to the family, making sure that I feel good. And then, what are some active things that I can do to get integrated and excited and really feel like I've created a community within my school really quickly. And I will say from my own personal perspective or, experience, I guess that was the one thing I did not do. I stayed with my little bubble of friends, and I really didn't get engaged into my college until almost like end of sophomore, junior year. And then I only had like 2 years left, right? And so I really wish that if I had a plan like this and somebody said, hey, sit down and really say and write down, what do I want to be involved in and what's exciting to me? I think if I had an action plan, I would have done that and had a very different experience my first 2 years. So I think it's really important. So in the book, you have those options and you can write your own Excel sheet, right? But really talk about all those pieces, because I think that those are really critical all to your success. So really, we've gone through a lot. This was the book. Now, we didn't talk too much about some of the beginning chapters. We kind of went back a few times, like your resume, your scholarships we talked about, and financial aid. But we talked about building your list, exploring colleges, applying, deciding, succeeding. So we really have gone through the whole maze and through the whole gamut of things, which is really awesome. So a lot of information. Kelly, do you have any comments or questions that you have?
No, I think that this was amazing, and all of the worksheets are such great resources for our students to use. So take advantage, and students, don't be overwhelmed and feel like you have to do all of this in one sitting. Like, take your time, spread it out, but use the resources that are provided. So thanks.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And tapping into that college support network, especially when you're making a decision, I think is really important. And I don't know, I guess I just wouldn't have my kid, they're going to go to a $30,000 school. I'd be like, oh, why do you want to go? And they're like, oh, it's a really nice school and it's really pretty. Like, dig in, right? And really talk about it, and don't make a rash decision. Like, you can take your time. You don't officially have to make a decision until May 1st. That's kind of the big college day. But they'll kind of push you. They'll start sending you information and like, oh, you need to book your residency, you need to book your orientation, you need to do all this and stuff like that. So make sure. Now, this could be a quick process, or it could be a month or two. Maybe you just need a little bit more time to make a decision. But I forget the statistic. I know I did an article when I was at FSW about something called summer melt. How many students actually apply, get admitted, and even possibly come to orientation, but then how many don't show up in August? Because they get working, they get a boyfriend or girlfriend, they decide to maybe do something else, maybe they go, but it's something almost like upwards to 25% of students that say they're coming in the spring don't even come on campus in the fall. Like, it's called summer melt. Like, it's a legit, like, researched and reviewed thing, and kind of this phenomenon, like, what happened here, right? What was the drop off? And so that's why I think if you really go through this process, I think no matter where you're going, I think you're going to be more successful and be more excited to stay, be successful, because that's what we want at the end. We want you to be successful, to get a degree, get a certificate, and keep moving forward. So I know we got a few people on here. Audience, have any questions that you have before we sign off of this great webinar? I'll check the chat. Nope. All right, I think we are good, my friend. Kelly, you're beautiful and amazing as always. Thank you for being my partner in crime once again this semester. I am going to be doing, I just talked with Sylvan Learning yesterday. I think we're going to do some in-person workshops coming up in January, February, and some stuff with them, which will be super exciting. So I do hope that if you guys are interested or have younger kids and you want to dive a little bit more in, that you come to those workshops. We'll be putting them out through Peach Jar and stuff like that. So, and posting those. And any final words, Kelly?
No, just thank you, Amanda. Again, it's always fun when we tag team and work on these projects together. So thank you so much for all the work you've put into it and for sharing all of your resources with our students. And you know, students take advantage. This is stuff that we didn't have when we were younger, and I would have probably made some much better decisions if I would have had some of these resources to use.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. If you want to get in touch with me, astirk@collegeonmace.com. Feel free to email me at any time. And thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.